Thank you so much, Sam and Danae. As you can see, these two organizations really power the MLS and ensure that all data is consistent and really ensures that that broker-to-broker collaboration can take place. So taking a step back, that may seem a little daunting when you look at those organizations and all of the services and offers that they apply to the market. So what we're going to do, and I want to shout out Jeremy from FMLS. Yesterday in one of the sessions, he brought up a really good point, is we've been doing this in the US for 115 years. We've made a ton of mistakes in getting to the point where we're at now. So with this next presentation, we're calling it the MLS, the Past, Present, and Future. Saul Klein, who is a pioneer in the industry and really has done a lot of work to get us to where we are today, is going to give this presentation. So Saul, let me get this set up for you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to thank Seppi and Riso and Real Tina, Giselle, and Ali for, that's the one, for asking me to do this. And I think it's been about 5 months now, so it's all I thought about for the last 5 months is get up every morning and think what I'm going to talk about. And when I talk about MLS, the history of MLS, the past, the present, and the future. You say it's down, Joe? There you go. So it's actually, I heard people talking yesterday, 50 years MLS. And then I heard people say 100 years of MLS, and I think it's more like 130 years of MLS. And so in 45 minutes, I'll try to give you 150 years of MLS. So for me, I'm a beneficiary of MLS. I've been using it for almost 50 years. And to me, MLS is a miracle. And I first discovered it when I was a naval officer, and a sailor had a real estate license and a second job as a licensee selling real estate. And he said, would you like to buy a house? And much like Sam's story, I'd seen my parents buy houses for years, and it always made a lot of sense, and they always made money. So I knew I wanted to buy a house. And so he put me in the back seat of his car and drove me around, and he threw me a book. And this was in 1975, and this book was amazing to me. It had all this data and all this, how many bedrooms and how many baths and how many square feet, and it was just a grid, but the information was incredible, and I fell in love with this book at that time, and I knew that what I needed to do was discover my own future and sell real estate and get involved in the sale of real estate. So we talk a lot about the future, and I'll tell you the future's already here. And I was a naval officer. I spent 10 years in the United States Navy, and when I was a midshipman, a plebe at the United States Naval Academy, this was a textbook, and it was a naval science book. And in this naval science book, we learned about ships. And the one up in the top was a brand new ship. And when I was in 1968, I learned about this concept of brand new ships. Instead of steam engines, gas turbines. Instead of navigating by stars and the moon and the sun, by satellites. But it was a dream. It was way out in front. They called it the DX concept because it was experimental. And I was commissioned, and I went aboard this brand new ship, which was a steam engine. You know that? These old ships, these new ships were steam engines. And even the nuclear aircraft carriers and submarines are steam engines. Right, just different means of generating energy. So the picture in the bottom, I was a flight deck officer on the ship above, and we deployed over the South China Sea, spent a lot of time landing helicopters on the back of that. And the next ship I was on in 1976 was that ship I learned about in 1968. And it was gas turbine. It had variable pitch props, and you push one button, it'd give you a latitude and longitude. And it was amazing, and it was a miracle. And I was lucky enough to put that ship into commission and take it through the Panama Canal and bring it up to San Diego, where I spent the rest of my naval career. And I got out of the Navy and got into real estate and started selling. And listening yesterday to the conversations around exclusive listings and around those things which seem to be impossible almost in certain marketplaces, made me think about the impossible things that I've seen come into the real estate industry over the last 40 years or so. And so I was instrumental in the sale of domain names when people didn't really understand what domain names were. And we had to introduce to people the concept of .com and .net and .org and .edu and .gov and .mil and then, can you believe this? People didn't believe that email was going to be part of their business. And when you talk to them about email, they'd look at you with a blank stare and they thought, there's no way this is going to become part of my business. And the same conversation around websites and the same conversation around online community. And my company, we were so involved with this, and we knew that we felt like we were beating our head against the wall, trying to convince people of things they didn't want to be convinced of. We called our company Internet Crusade because we knew we had to go out and we had to just keep beating our head against the wall to get these ideas across. And then I was involved with putting listings on the internet. And up until that time, brokers were really concerned about keeping that information proprietary. And the reason they believed that people came to realtors is because realtors knew what was for sale and where it was. And nobody wanted to put their listings out to the world. And yet we were able to convince people through conversations with them that their listings should go on the internet. And so I got to participate on that first team at Realtor.com where we actually took listings and put them on the internet. And where's Emily? Austin was the first association of realtors to put their listings on the internet. Not many people know that. And then this idea of online learning. In 2001, nobody believed that you could learn anything online, or not many people. And so we got involved in online learning for the National Association of Realtors, and we brought this course called ePro, and we enrolled over 70,000 people over a 10-year period of time. And again, it wasn't an easy thing to do because nobody believed it. Nobody believed it could have, kind of like nobody believes that exclusive listings make a lot of sense, but they actually do make a lot of sense. And then listing syndication. Nobody wanted to get involved in listings. Listing syndication was about sending your listings everywhere. And that was a new concept. And it didn't take quite as long to get people to believe that. But when we first started to syndicate data, there were no data license rules. And so we had to introduce people to this whole idea of data licensing. So the future is already here. I've been a beneficiary of that future. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Now I can't be bothered to see any crazy salesman. We've got a battle to fight. And so if you're going to take this idea of MLS to the world, you have to be ready and prepared to beat your head against the wall, because there are people that just don't want to listen to you, don't want to believe it, but it's already here. It's going to take place with you or without you. And so we'll talk a little bit about paradigms, because people have talked about paradigms yesterday and a little bit today, and a paradigm shift. I think we lose sight of what a paradigm is. And so a paradigm is nothing more than a model, and we all have different models. And the way I sell real estate might not be the same way you sell real estate. I got my own model of selling real estate. You've got your own model. In the United States, we got our own model of football. In Europe, in the rest of the world, you have your own model of football. So a paradigm is nothing more than a model and a way things are done. And a paradigm shift, and this is critical, a paradigm shift is a fundamental change, not just a change. So people talk about change, they don't give it enough emphasis. When they talk about a paradigm shift, that's a fundamental change in the way things are done. And so important points about paradigms and paradigm shifts. When a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Everyone goes back to zero. Your past success guarantees nothing when a paradigm shifts. Doesn't matter how successful you were doing things the old ways. When things change, when a paradigm shifts, when there's a fundamental change, sometimes you can't see it because you were so successful doing it the other way. And your past success may block you from seeing the future. So once MLS was a new idea, and now it's 130 years old, it's an evolution, it's not a revolution. It takes time. Sam was showing these diagrams of this slow progression, and then all of a sudden it shoots up. So we're talking about this evolutionary process that takes place, that's taken place for the last 135, 140 years. What is an MLS? It's a multiple listing service. Was it Danae that said it's not Major League Soccer? I have to deal with that myself. You're right. It is a multiple listing service. It's an enterprise that aggregates data, provides access of for sale data, and more than that today, but initially for sale data to all MLS members. We call them, I think Emily was talking about this yesterday, subscribers and participants. That happens to be the model that we use. And so that's an MLS. MLS structure and governance in the United States. It can be a committee of an association of realtors. It can be a wholly owned subsidiary, typically with a separate board of directors. There can be regional multiple listing services. There can be broker-owned multiple listing services. So there are a number of different types of organizations and structures and governance of multiple listing services. An MLS is a unique, current, and maintained database of property listings. It's what's for sale. It's inventory. Now, it's much greater than that today, but that's the primary use for most people that list and sell real estate. It's also valuable for appraisers to know what has sold and what the values have been in the past. The private database, it's not a public utility. The public doesn't automatically get access to the MLS because it's great data and it's great information. It's not a public utility. It's private. It's a private database. It makes it easy for real estate professionals to know what's on the market. It's searchable. It's funded by real estate professionals, right? So people pay fees to belong to MLSs. Usually owned by an association of realtors, but not necessarily so, but usually. And then the MLS manages and maintains that database and the operation, the day-to-day operation. And the software is usually provided by outside services and outside vendors. So I thought I'd take, this is, in case you've never seen it, this is inside an MLS. This is my MLS in San Diego. And for those of you that are interested in San Diego, I'd be glad to talk to you at the break. We've had some controversy in San Diego, and I've been serving the last 5 months as the interim president of that MLS. I thought I was done with all of this, but I'm doing it again. And so this is inside, and you can see there are a number of different products and services available inside our MLS, information, statistics, other products available. And then you can go into the actual MLS itself, and you can provide a search. And over on the right, that's kind of interesting. That's advertising. And I wasn't in total agreement on the way this was structured, but I haven't been able to change that yet, but I'm working on it. So I entered some information about what I was interested in to find it, and there's one piece of property came up in my search, and there's information. This is inside the MLS database. Any properties for sale in San Diego are going to be available here, and you can search for it. The listing information can be made public, and the way that it can be made public is through data licensing agreements. And so in the States, we have internet data exchange and virtual office websites and syndication, different licensing agreements for how that information can be utilized. You can go out to the portals like Zillow and Realtor.com, and what can they do with it? Private information, such as personal contact information, is not made public through the MLS, so not everything in the MLS is syndicated and made available to the rest of the world. So what is the MLS? For me, it's a single source of truth. And it's updated by an army of people out there every day that are collecting data and are policing this data to make sure. It's a single source of truth. It's the gold standard of what's available and what's on the market. But you're not going to find better information about properties available for sale than you'll find through an MLS. And the portals, where do they get their information? They get it from the MLSs. Why? Because it's the best information available. It's policed. If it's not accurate, if the rules are broken, somebody's going to report that. There's a fine structure. There are ways to keep this data accurate and up to date, and people can utilize that data for a number of different reasons. The MLS is an industry. And so you've heard from Danae, you've heard about CMLS and Sam and Riso, one of the sponsors here, critical. It's an industry. The beneficiaries, consumers, first and foremost, the consumers, the people that realtors serve are beneficiaries of MLS. And then, of course, the agents and the brokers and appraisers benefit from MLS. And associations and MLSs, actually, one of the reasons to belong to an association might be to have access to an MLS. Franchisors and vendors, portals, all beneficiaries, consultants, beneficiaries of MLS, governments. In San Diego, we sell our MLS data to the county assessor. And so there are benefits for many beneficiaries and stakeholders in MLS. The essential elements of our MLSs in the United States and North America are exclusive listings. And people say, well, nobody wants to sign an exclusive listing. They want more exposure, so they sign a number of listings with a number of different brokerage firms. Not where I live. You sign it with one broker, it goes into the MLS, and then you can distribute it to all the different places you want to have it distributed. We have a code of ethics. We cooperate. Critical piece. Rules to keep information timely and accurate. This is a key point. Brokers have to enter all their listings. One of the things that makes MLS work is brokers have to enter all of their listings. It's not about just entering some of your listings. It's about entering all of your listings. And say I started selling real estate in 1975. So I haven't sold other people's real estate since about 1999. But when I first got involved in real estate in San Diego, we had a commercial MLS, but it wasn't any good. And the reason it wasn't any good is that you didn't have the rule. There was not a rule that said you had to put all your listings in. And so what happened is the only listings that got into the commercial MLS were the listings that the commercial brokers couldn't sell. And so you could take that commercial MLS book, because it was a book at the time, and you could make deals out of the information that was in that book, but it wasn't the best. It wasn't like the residential book, because the residential book made the brokers put everything in. So it's about putting all of your listings. And that's why when we talk about pocket listings and not putting your listings into and withholding in a hot market, withholding your listings, that's not good for MLS. MLS is about putting all of your listings in, because if all you have to do is put in the ones you want, you're going to put the ones in that you don't think you can sell. And that kind of defeats the purpose of an MLS. So it's all your listings. MLSs we have, and maybe that's not the future, but right now we have a compensation vehicle within the MLS. So one of the things that makes our MLS work is a compensation vehicle. I'll talk a little bit about the different compensation vehicles over the years. Right now, because we're talking about MLS present, the MLS, the compensation vehicle in MLS is a unilateral offer of compensation, right? Unilateral offer of compensation. That's currently the compensation model. It's under attack right now. You probably have heard about this, right? So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I just throw these up there. I don't want to spend any time on this, but the Sitzer case, $1.78 billion in damages, tripled $5 billion in damages. And then the Moeller case, so we've got, and maybe that's what Sitzer case. I got that slide out of order. 83 million. Remax settled for 55 million. This is big numbers. No Select is MLS PIN. Gibson's another case. And so what's being attacked? And the DOJ's and Department of Justice is involved. So what we've got is, remember, part of an MLS that we're familiar with in North America has this offer of compensation. The offer of compensation is being attacked. Lots of litigation right now. So MLS creates an economical and efficient way of sharing property information. It's accurate and it's updated and available to consumers in various ways. It's credible. It's enforced by rules. Sam talked about this, a system. It's a culture. It's a single source of truth. I mentioned that. It provides for shorter market times. Really kind of interesting. It's almost your property real estate never used to be considered as a liquid asset, but it's almost a liquid asset now. You put it on the market, you can have it sold in a pretty short period of time, and it's the MLS that makes that so. Greater transparency and accuracy, more opportunities for monetization. So now we're looking at new ways to monetize data through the MLS. As we look at the MLS of the future, I think that we're going to be surprised at some of the way that MLS data is going to be monetized, particularly transaction data. And MLS provides and manifests visibility for the property and for the listing agent, fair competition between small and large brokers, more transactions. More transactions mean more commission dollars over time. So that's kind of the MLS that we're dealing with now, and a key point is that offer of compensation. That was one of the things that kind of brought the MLS together. In the past, in the beginning, kind of started in the late 1800s and 1900s. Before MLS systems began to take hold, brokers had bad reputations. Not that they don't necessarily have bad reputations today, but bad reputations, right? And were really dealers and speculators. There was no license law, no cooperation, no representation, no agency duties. Brokers would take options on property and resell them. So net listings, buy it for $100,000 or get an option on it for $100,000, offer it for $200,000 and make the difference the difference would be your fee. And also open listings. Non-exclusive listing to many brokers. So that was the way it was. And this is one of my favorite pictures, and it's got to be an open listing in San Diego, right? And so, but you'd never let today, with an exclusive listing, you never let other people put signs on your listing like that. But that was the way it was, open listings. And so to increase professionalism and the reputation of real estate practitioners, we created an MLS, tools to accomplish through an organization of competitors, through a listing service, and that was a critical thing back in 1906, 1907, to create a listing service. And what made this work were exclusive listings, which might be a paradigm shift for some people, to have to go from open listings to exclusive listings. And agency duties, because the founders of NAR believed that to be a profession, you really had to have fiduciary duties to your clients. And so we had something called the National Association of Real Estate Exchanges and pitch sessions. And I remember when I first got involved in real estate, we had pitch sessions where you get together with other brokers and you say, I've got this, haves and wants. And you'd pitch your haves and wants to each other. And then National Association of Real Estate Exchanges, and that turned into NAR, actually. In 1907, they coined the word MLS. NAR was founded in 1908. This is the brochure from that first convention. Essential elements, again, were exclusive listings, a code of ethics, and brokers had to enter all of their listings, and rules to keep the information timely and accurate. And a compensation vehicle. Key piece always has been a compensation vehicle. And prior to 1996, the compensation vehicle for our MLSs in North America was something called a unilateral offer of subagency. A unilateral offer of subagency. Didn't become compensation, an offer of compensation until 1996. So prior to 1996, when somebody took a listing, they represented the seller, and anybody who was a member of the MLS also represented the seller. And nobody had to tell the buyer that everybody represented the seller. That was the way it worked. And then we had some, now something else it creates is a sold catalog. So we have this comp book that was really a great book, and it came out every 6 months. Can you believe it? Every 6 months. This came out and told us all the properties that it sold, and when we were doing CMAs, we'd pull this book off the shelf, 6 months worth of sold properties, and we'd figure out what the property we were thinking about listing was, what the property might be worth. And so 6 months, the information belonged to the MLS. The book belonged to the MLS. You paid for it, but we were very, very controlling about who owned this data. So again, MLS has evolved. One way to look at the evolution, when I first got involved, we had 3-ring binders. And anybody remember 3-ring binders? So you had 3-ring binders, right? So you got this, and every week you'd get a sheet that had paper, and you'd go into your 3-ring binder and you'd make pen and ink changes. Errata, pen and ink changes. And then, I said, then the new technology hit us. It was glue. And they started to bind these books together, and we got every 2 weeks, actually, we got a book on single families 1 week, and the next week we got a book on condos and 2 units, and the next week we got a book on single families. So it became these bound books, which, by the way, is really tough to get rid of the books. Right? We couldn't rip them out of people's hands. So even though we had technology, we couldn't get rid of the books. And so the way we got rid of the books is we created this downward pricing spiral, where if people didn't buy the books, Annie, you remember this, if they didn't buy the books, the price went up. And then fewer people would buy the books. So the next month, what would happen? Fewer people bought the books, so the price would go up. So fewer people would buy the books, so the next month the price would go up, right? And that's the way we got rid of the books. Then MLS 3.0 around 1977, thereabouts. I call it MLS 3.0. We got dumb terminals. Anybody remember dumb terminals? So the dumb terminals were just like a terminal in the office, and you had to call a phone number, and you had to stick the phone in the back of the computer. And so a big part of the system were phone lines. And then MLS 4.0, then we got web-based. That was a major change. Market Links, the first web-based MLS. This is amazing. And then MLS 5.0, that's where we had social media and data sharing and consolidation, and the number of MLSs in the country started to go down. And I think the next step is MLS 6.0. That's coming. So 1.0 to 3.0 was unilateral offer of sub-agency. That was the compensation model. And then we went to agency disclosure in California, and it spread across the country, because remember, we didn't have to tell buyers we didn't represent them in real estate transactions. In '86, we passed agency disclosure. In 1988, then we had to implement it in California, and then spread across the country. Offer of compensation, 1993 to 96. The offer of compensation was a consumer move to benefit consumers, because now we had to disclose to consumers who we represented in real estate transactions, and it's now under attack. So you know what that means? We're going to find a new way to do it. So the World Wide Web created a paradigm shift. Public access to MLSs in 1995, web-based, and then social media. This was when we first started to display listings in '93, when we kind of started to tell the world, you know, we want you to see what's for sale. This was Real Select. This is actually Realtor.com originated in San Diego before it went to Austin. And at the bottom, if you look at the bottom, it says kiosk. You get something. The automated 7-minute home finder. Wow. That was so important that it went on the brochure. Right? This was a big deal, that you could, 7 minutes, you could stand in front of a kiosk in a drugstore for 7 minutes to wait for the result, and we thought that was a big deal. And then Realtor.com in 1995, that was a new idea to put them on the internet, and as I mentioned, Austin was the first one really to do that. And then we had to socialize this concept. We had to get people used to the idea, and I think you're going to have to get people used to the idea of exclusive listings. And so how did we do it? 3 things: fear, greed, and love. And so we had to scare people, and then we had to tell them about the extra money you could make by doing this, and then we had to tell them how great it was for everybody. And so this is actually an old slide, for information from an old slide that I used because I was the one that had to introduce this to the world. So what is internet advertising? I said this is an inexpensive new medium accessible by 20 million users. That was a big number back then. And it exists now, and it's the wave of the future. And then people didn't believe me. And we said, well, there's over 4,000 current real estate sites. 4,000. There's like millions right now. And each one offers only a few listings. And they're not accurate. And the number is growing like crazy. And who's sponsoring these sites? Your enemies. You know, the newspapers and the magazines and national and regional brokers and non-traditional real estate organizations. So you better give us your listing information so we can put it up on the internet, because if you don't, these non-traditional entities are going to get a hold of it, and it's going to change the way real estate's sold. Can you think of any non-traditional entities? We say continuing fragmentation will weaken one of our strongest assets, our listings, our inventory. And this fragmentation will allow these non-traditional services to gain a foothold. And they're not necessarily realtor friendly. So we kind of try to scare people, and we did. And Bill Gates, and I use this book, Bill Gates, in page 172 in The Road Ahead in 1995, he actually talks about the real estate, hunting for real estate on the web in the future. I like the bottom one. It says, the whole system of real estate agencies and commissions may be changed by the principals having direct access to so much information. So the internet in 1995, we had all these portals, and this was really public access to MLS. So when people talk 50 years, they're really talking about this, right? It goes back way before this. Realtor.com, really the first major, and this was owned by the National Association of Realtors, and if you have an interest in why the National Association of Realtors doesn't own it the way it used to, I can talk to you about that at the break. And we had Homes.com. These are the first generation portals. Home Seekers and Home Advisor, which was Brad Inman's entry into the marketplace. And then the second generation portals were Zillow and Trulia and Homes.com, and Realtor.com remained. And it was all about the data, but there were no data rules. And so because there were no data rules, people that accepted the data could do anything they wanted with it. We had a lot of data duplication. We had stale data on the web. The data was inaccurate. No data license agreements. And people were creating derivative works around our MLS data and making money from it, and the money wasn't coming back to the MLS. So how can this data be monetized to the benefit of the MLS? People are working on it. One of the things we thought of was real estate syndication. And so this was about taking your listing and then distributing it everywhere. And so if you got it into the MLS could distribute it everywhere at your option. And now by listing with one broker, you could get your listing information to as many different places as you wanted to get it distributed. And that distribution created, somebody mentioned yesterday, I agree 100%, a listing's a marketing asset. Oh, I think it was Matt that said this. Listing's a marketing asset, right? And so this distribution generates leads. And something else to kind of keep in mind is we generated for sale sites, but MLS sites today and the data that's fed from MLS databases is much more than a for sale site. They're really, I call them property wikis, where you can find properties that are for sale and properties that are not for sale, because the fact that a property is for sale is just a moment in time in the life of the property. And so if you go on most of the portals today, you'll find properties for sale and properties that aren't for sale. And lots of information. All the information and records about properties can now be accessed online. And so the future of MLS services now is MLS 6.0, and people have talked about this. It's the authoritative and trusted source of all real estate for realtors and consumers. MLS participates in the downstream revenue created from the data. And I know we do in a minor way today, but it's going to be there's much more opportunity than people are looking at with monetization of the data. And I think someday we're going to see a reversed economic model. And the reversed economic model is today, you think about the internet today, you have to put anybody that contributes content to the internet's typically paid. Isn't that how it works? And yet we have to pay to belong to our MLS, and that information is distributed, and so we pay to give people our information, and then they make all the money. And so it should be, kind of think about it, how many of you transact online for stocks and bonds, and anybody do that? And you don't have to pay for that, right? And the reason you don't have to pay for that, and I used to be a securities broker, and I used to make money by transacting for people online. But the reason that you don't have to pay to transact online anymore is because that transaction data is so valuable to hedge funds and to the capital markets. Those are the entities that really want to know what's being transacted. And they actually pay for the price of the apparatus that allows you and I to trade for nothing. And so think about the real estate marketplace and the fact that all the money that's involved in real estate, and the fact, at least in North America, the way that loans are funded and the way that loans are packaged and the way that loans are sold in the secondary market, and the value of those loans over time as the value of the property changes. And to know what's transacting and what's not transacting is valuable information to the capital markets and to the insurance companies and to others. So as we look down the line, we're going to see, I think, a reverse economic model. And we're going to see changes to the compensation model. And Ali mentioned yesterday this Paris paradigm, which is a kind of a new idea of aligning the interest of the person who represents the buyer with the buyer's interest of buying the property for a lower price. New ideas are going to be necessary. But the MLS is not a new thing. It's been around for 140 years, and hopefully it'll be around for another 140 years. It'll look a lot different, and I won't be around. But I know a lot of you probably will be. So thanks for your time. We'll just cut it right here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Saul. How's everybody doing? I know it's a little warm in here, yeah? Well, only 5 more hours, so. So with that, we're going to take a 20-minute coffee break. When we come back, we have a couple exciting rapid-fire sessions, which will be talking about how AI is used in real estate and specifically MLS listings. So come back in 20 minutes. I'll make a couple announcements on the microphone, and we'll go from there.